All right, get this. Two guys decide to rob not one, but two banks.
Two banks.
Two banks in Pittsburgh in broad daylight.
Hmm.
And they weren't wearing any masks, no weapons or anything, just
Lemon juice.
smeared on their faces.
They smeared lemon juice on their faces?
Yeah, they thought it would, make them invisible to the security cameras.
You're kidding, right?
Nope, totally serious. This was back in 1995. These guys, MacArthur Wheeler and Clifton Earl Johnson, they were totally serious about their lemon juice invisibility cloak.
Ooh.
Especially Wheeler.
What?
Oh, yeah. And the best part, when they got arrested and the cops showed them the security footage, Wheeler was genuinely shocked. He was like, but I wore the lemon juice.
But I wore the lemon juice. Oh, man. Unbelievable. So let me guess. He got the idea from, using lemon juice as invisible ink.
You got it. He knew it could be used for that, so he figured, hey, why not invisibility too, right?
That's some next-level logic right there.
Yeah. Oh, it gets better. He even tested it out. Took a Polaroid picture of himself with the lemon juice on his face, and when the picture didn't develop, he thought, aha, proof.
He blamed the camera instead of, realizing Polaroids are a little, well.
Yeah, you'd think he'd question the Polaroid before the lemon juice, right? But no, that's where this whole Dunning-Kruger effect thing comes in, doesn't it?
Bingo. Wheeler's unwavering belief in his lemon juice plan, despite the obvious flaws, it's a classic example of the Dunning-Kruger effect in action. I mean, the lemon juice is what makes the story so memorable. But the real gem here is how it highlights this fascinating psychological phenomenon.
Okay, so the goal of this deep dive is to figure out how these lemon juice bandits ended up contributing to this groundbreaking concept in psychology.
Exactly. We're going to trace the path from those ridiculous robberies to the discovery of the Dunning-Kruger effect. And it all started with this psychology professor at Cornell University, David Dunning. He stumbled upon the lemon juice robbers' story in the news and was immediately intrigued.
I bet he got a good laugh out of it at first. But what happened next? What was it about this story that made him want to, start a whole research project?
Well, sure. On the surface, it's pretty funny. But Dunning saw something more. He thought maybe there was a connection between being incompetent and not being able to, recognize that incompetence. He theorized that maybe Wheeler just didn't know enough about cameras and invisibility and things like that, and that was why he couldn't see how flawed his plan was.
So he was basically thinking, this guy is so clueless, he doesn't even know he's clueless.
Pretty much. And that's what's so interesting about the Dunning-Kruger effect. It suggests that sometimes the less we know about something, the more likely we are to overestimate our own abilities. It's a cognitive bias that can have, real-world consequences.
So how did Dunning go from reading this news article about these lemon juice bandits to conducting, actual scientific research?
Well, he partnered with his graduate student, Justin Kruger, and together they designed a bunch of studies to investigate this idea. They wanted to see if there was a measurable connection between someone's actual competence and how competent they thought they were.
So Dunning and Kruger, they wanted to see if their hunch about, the lemon juice bandit was more than just a funny story. Did they actually find this link between incompetence and a lack of self-awareness?
Oh, yeah, definitely. What they found was groundbreaking, really. They noticed a pattern kept popping up. People who weren't very competent in a specific area, they tended to overestimate their abilities in that same area, way overestimate. They just didn't have the knowledge or experience to realize what they were lacking,
And this is what they call the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah, exactly. The research basically confirmed what Dunning was thinking about Wheeler. The guy was so incompetent that he couldn't even see it. It's not just about being a little clueless. It's about, a fundamental inability to accurately judge your own skills.
So does that mean, we're all walking around thinking we're experts, but we're actually totally incompetent? That's kind of scary.
Well, I don't think we're all robbing banks with lemon juice on our faces. But the Dunning-Kruger effect, it can show up in everyday life in ways that aren't so obvious. Think about that friend who's always giving advice, even when they don't really know what they're talking about, thinking they've got all the answers.
Oh, or like that coworker who always volunteers for stuff they can't handle, then misses deadlines and messes everything up.
Exactly. They're so confident in their abilities, even though they're totally misguided, that they don't even realize they're causing problems.
This dual burden you mentioned earlier is pretty wild. Incompetent people not only make bad choices, but they don't even realize they're messing up.
Yeah.
It's like a double whammy. So how do we escape this cycle of, being overconfident and messing things up?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Dunning and Kruger, they found that just giving feedback or pointing out mistakes, it often wasn't enough. incompetent people often just can't process that feedback the right way.
So you can't just tell someone they're doing something wrong. You have to help them understand why it's wrong.
You got it. Overcoming the Dunning-Kruger effect is all about cultivating intellectual humility, being open to the idea that we might be wrong, that we don't know everything, and that we can always improve.
So basically, instead of like holding on to our wrong beliefs, we need to be willing to challenge those beliefs,
Yeah.
seek out new information, be open to changing our minds when we see evidence that contradicts what we think we know.
Exactly. It requires a shift from a fixed mindset, where we think our abilities are set in stone, to a growth mindset where we embrace challenges and see mistakes as opportunities to learn and grow.
So how does all this connect back to our lemon juice bandits? Did their story have like any lasting impact, or was it just a funny anecdote?
That's what's so interesting about this case. The lemon juice robberies, they weren't just funny, they became a powerful example of how not being self-aware can have real consequences. And it's not just in psychology either. The case popped up in discussions about other stuff too.
Really? Like what? How did the lemon juice bandit find his way into other fields?
Well, for one thing, the case became this talking point in education. Some experts were saying that if teachers aren't self-aware about their teaching abilities, it could hurt their students' learning.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like if a teacher is overconfident in their methods, they might not be open to trying new things or, getting more training.
Exactly. And the case also sparked this whole debate about performance-based pay for teachers. People who supported it argued that it could encourage teachers to be more self-reflective and improve their teaching.
So the lemon juice bandit's legacy, it goes beyond psychology and education, huh? That's pretty wild. Were there any other fields that found MacArthur Wheeler's story relevant?
Get this, Wheeler's story even popped up in discussions about criminology, can you believe it? Some criminologists used it as, a thought experiment to explore the idea of criminal incompetence.
Criminal incompetence.
Yeah, they were trying to figure out, how to handle criminals who are so inept that they don't even realize they're committing crimes, and what that means for, law enforcement and the justice system and all that.
Wow, that's pretty mind-boggling. To think there might be criminals out there like Wheeler who genuinely think their plans are, brilliant.
Right. It really shows how complicated human behavior can be.
Yeah.
And how not being self-aware can have, serious consequences, not just for the individual, but for, society as a whole.
Seems like the lemon juice bandit, even though he tried to stay invisible, he ended up leaving a pretty big mark on, well, different fields of study. It's amazing how a story that starts with something as, I don't know, as silly as lemon juice can lead to such deep insights.
Yeah, it shows the power of, thinking across different disciplines, how fields that seem totally unrelated can actually inform and enrich each other when we look for those unexpected connections. The lemon juice robberies, they remind us that knowledge doesn't fit into neat little boxes. It's all connected, and it's always changing.
So we started with the absurdity of lemon juice invisibility, and then we went to the complexities of the Dunning-Kruger effect, and we even touched on education and criminology along the way. What a journey. Before we wrap up this deep dive, let's recap the key takeaways for our listeners, just so everything's clear.
Sure. We began with MacArthur Wheeler and Clifton Earl Johnson, the lemon juice bandits who thought they could become invisible. Their story, even though it's outlandish, it's a perfect example of the Dunning-Kruger effect, which, explains why incompetent people often don't realize they're incompetent.
And we learned that this cognitive bias, it's everywhere. It can affect our personal relationships, our work, pretty much everything. It really highlights how hard it is to accurately judge ourselves. And it shows us the double whammy of incompetence. Not only do unskilled people make bad choices, but they don't even realize they're messing up, so they can't learn from their mistakes.
Right. And we talked about ways to fight the Dunning-Kruger effect, and we emphasized how important humility is, being willing to learn and having a growth mindset, remembering that we don't know everything. That's the first step to actually, knowing more.
And we also explored how the lemon juice robberies had a wider impact, sparking discussions in fields like education policy and criminology, raising important questions about, accountability, professional development, and the very nature of criminal incompetence.
Yeah. The lemon juice bandit story, it's a reminder that we should all try to be humble and always be eager to learn new things. It's a reminder to, stay curious, question what we think we know, and Be open to learning from the most unexpected places, even lemon juice wielding bank robbers.
So the next time you're feeling super confident about something, think about MacArthur Wheeler and his lemon juice. Ask yourself, am I seeing things clearly, or am I falling for the Dunning-Kruger effect?
Good question. Until next time, stay curious, and remember, the first step to being competent is admitting you might not be.
And that's a wrap on this deep dive. Thanks for listening, everyone.